right, what's up, friends, family, supporters of Hitman's Haven? We are back after a little bit of a hiatus. I had my surgery and we kind of had some computer issues we had to get taken care of. And now both Trey and I are back and we're continuing with our review of the entire league, the top five players, our top five players anyway, at each position group. And today we have the interior defensive line. T, you're up. What you got?
Yeah, so obviously distinguishing between interior and edge guys, that makes it a lot different because we talking about a lot of different things, and I think it really makes it easy as far as number one, given that a couple months ago Aaron Donald decided to retire, because he would have been it'd have been him or Patrick Mahomes if we were talking about best player period in football, and certainly the best
No
defensive
doubt.
player in football for a very, very long time was Aaron Donald. So thanks to him for making it slightly easier. So I think for the sake of this one, I think it's easiest probably to go from number one out. My number one, I believe, after Aaron Donald is undisputed, and that's Chris Jones, of the Chiefs. Obviously, he's been just flat out ridiculous from the moment he came out of Mississippi State. I'm pretty sure he held out the first game this year against the Lions and was in a suite, and he was missed. And from the moment he came back, he was the same Chris Jones that the Chiefs have used and needed. I mean, outside of he and Aaron Donald, there's really no one else that consistently disrupts the passer the way that Chris Jones does, because it's just so hard to do. As Packers fans, obviously we saw some young guys be disruptive from the interior this past year in limited reps, and it's a very rare thing to be able to do. Even Devontae Wyatt, although he doesn't finish necessarily the best, being able to pass rush from inside is just so hard. Pass rushing in general is a hard thing to do, but being able to do it effectively inside at the rate that Chris Jones does, and also, be an effective run stopper, he's without a doubt my number one. My number two is another young guy. He's younger than Chris Jones, but I mean, he's been a force ever since he got into the league. He's definitely impactful as a pass rusher, but certainly not to the extent of the two guys we already mentioned, and that's Quinnen Williams. Believe he got paid like a year or so ago, and rightfully so, right? He's the single most dominant force on a very dominant Jets defense, and he was that from the moment he stepped into New York. So he's my number two. I think, coming out of college, that was what they expected him to be, and he's been all of that and then some. Going into my 3 through 5, I think that's where the rankings get a little tighter, because there's just a lot of guys who impact interior defensive line in different ways. So my number 3 is going to be Jeffrey Simmons from the Titans. I think his pass rush production is kind of up and down every year, but I mean, an interior defensive tackle who has 20 plus career sacks as an extremely young player is still ridiculous. And dude is just on a highlight reel every single week. It feels like making big time plays. So right now he'd be my number 3. And for right now, my number 4 and 5, ironically, were college teammates, and one of them was my teammate. He's now moved on to the Raiders. But I'm going to have Dexter Lawrence of the Giants at 4 and Christian Wilkins of the Raiders, now formerly the Miami Dolphins, at 5. I think they both have very unique play styles in relation to each other. I think Dexter is just a mammoth. Like, you're literally not going to ever move him off the ball. And as an interior defensive lineman, like, that's where things start, right? So for him to be able to improve as a pass rusher and be effective in that capacity, I mean, dude's like almost 350 pounds. Like, it's ridiculous for him to be able to do what he does. And he's just an animal. Like, you're just not moving him anywhere, and he's going to hold it down. So he's my number 4 spot. And then Christian at number 5. Obviously, I got to see him play, firsthand. Us, being in the same draft class, going to Miami. But I mean, he just makes plays. Like, he's kind of goofy and quirky off the field, and everyone kind of notices that, and he's had some weird incidents even on the field as well. But at the end of the day, his production is top tier for an interior defensive lineman. He's just gonna make plays, and in contrast to Dexter, he's not the tallest guy. He's not short by any means, but he's not the tallest interior defensive lineman, and he's not just that gap stuffer. He's gonna slip and make tackles. Dude is always somehow ending up on offense, or at least he was in Miami. He's just like a unique athlete for the defensive tackle position, and that allows him to make a ton of plays. And that's why he's been as effective as he was in Miami, and that's why he got a really nice deal to go over to Las Vegas. So he's my number 5. But, I feel like I said, well, actually, now that I think about it, all those guys are really young. I don't think a single one of those dudes is even like 29, with Chris Jones being the oldest. But, with Aaron Donald transitioning, the top tier of interior defensive linemen is certainly a young crop of players.
Yeah, I remember when he got signed by the Raiders, with Christian, I was like, yep, he is one of those players who, to me, was born to be a Raider at some point. He was just kind of disguised as a Dolphin for his first, 4 years. What is it, 5 years?
Yeah, 5. Yeah.
Was this? That was 5 years with the Dolphins. But we have the exact same first 2. We start differing when you get to 3, but it's still one of your players. Look, for me, when I looked at interior, basically guys who make big differences in the game, it goes back to a lot of the conversations we have about some of the other positions, and that is, how versatile are they? What all do they impact? You got to obviously look at the run game, the pass game. Do they actually have sack production? How are they when it comes to one-on-one blocks? And I looked at all of those statistics, and quite frankly, and when I say statistics, I mean I'm looking at them, and how what you and I are able to do that the analytics people can't do. They have to be writing it down. We can actually calculate in our head what's going on and what type of impact they're making. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at, is this guy being blocked one-on-one at all? Is this guy collapsing the pocket? Is this guy finishing? Which is, it's so crazy because going back to you mentioned him, Devontae White. Look, let me tell you something. I don't know what's going to happen over the next few years with Devontae, but if that guy finishes, he changes everything about what he is as a player. Because now, I mean, nobody can be put where Aaron was, but when you look at what he did, he was unblockable. He was coming right up the middle. It doesn't matter if you doubled him, you singled him, whatever. Aaron Donald was going to actually make you have to get the ball out quickly or move. And quite frankly, that's what Devontae does. He just doesn't finish like Aaron does. And that's the part where he just needs to get that finish. Chris Jones, though, and Quinn Williams, Chris on a higher level. So it is a definitive one when you talk about Chris Jones. And, all the way back from, like you said, all the way from the beginning when he first, came into the league and he had that equipment malfunction at the combine when he fell. I mean, he came into the league kind of this jolly guy, but he started wrecking havoc from jump, and he has been wrecking it ever since. When you look at a defensive interior lineman who has a lot to do with you winning Super Bowls, I mean, they've won Super Bowls because of what he does on the defensive side and with what obviously Pat Mahomes does on the offensive side. And he is just that effective, and he cannot be blocked one-on-one. It's just not going to happen. And he's a tall guy. So we're not even talking about a shorter guy who's leveraging him the way Aaron Donald does. This guy is just, he's quicker, he's faster, he's stronger, He has more moves. He is just not going to be blocked. So when it comes to Chris Jones, he is by far, to me, number one, with Aaron Donald now on to, our side of the business. Quentin Williams, I think there may be still some more for him, but he's still also that guy that you're not going to block him. He's a menace. He's making you change what you do with your offense wherever he is. You got to know where Quentin Williams is. And I don't really need to say a whole lot more. He does a lot of he's kind of a Chris Jones light without the sacks. He has a lot of the same type of in terms of what he impacts as does Chris Jones. My 3 is actually Dexter Lawrence. And you use the word. He is a mammoth. You're not I don't know that you're going to find at any point him losing any ground on a play. He is going to collapse whoever is in front of him. He's huge, and he has sack production. I mean, and you're talking about a guy who I don't know. I think they list him at 342.
Yeah.
He may be heavier than that. He may be one of them guys who they put the weight, a little bit lower than he is. Unlike, some guys, they want to basically pretend they're bigger than they are. That's not the case with Dexter Lawrence, and we can all see that. So from the standpoint of what he does and who he is, everybody would like to have that zero technique who is not going to be moved at all. And you're in trouble as it relates to your pocket if you think you're going to be able to stand back there right behind the center and make something happen. It's not going to happen, not with Dexter Lawrence in the game. My number 4 is going even younger than these guys are. But like you said, nobody is older than 29. And that's Jalen Carter. Jalen, to me, again, we're talking about impacting the game in multiple areas. He is, again, another freak athletically. It's kind of crazy to me when you think about Georgia putting out all these NFL players. I mean, at some point, when do you run out, man? You mean to tell me they can keep on having these defensive linemen, these huge guys running fast, jumping high, lifting a whole bunch of weight, and when they get down on the football field, they are having an impact on games. And Jalen Carter has been that. He's had that. He's been that dude since he got there. Now, I think to a degree, not as much as with Devontae, to a degree, Jalen needs to finish more also. But he's finishing more, than our guy. And the way he's doing it, the future that he has, I can't see him in my case being any lower than 4. Number 5 was tough because, and you'll obviously when we'll talk about our honorable mention guys, but number 5 was a little tough for me because there are a lot of guys who you really got to study the tape. And I will admit that I'm cheating a little bit with this guy because I study more of his tape because he's on our team. So I get to see more of him and how he's impacting what's happening with the other guys. And that's Kenny Clark. So Kenny Clark is number 5 to me. I think that if we actually get other guys in there when Kenny's in there and they feel like that guy is a threat, I think Kenny's sack numbers would go up because he is also a guy who, you're talking 6'3", 314, but he plays almost like Dexter Lawrence sometimes. They can't move Kenny Clark, and he's supposed to be more so a smaller guy. But yet and still, to me, Kenny is a legit 3 technique. But in this new scheme, how are we going to get Kenny and Devontae on the field? I think Devontae would be the 3, and Kenny would be 0. He'd be at the nose. And he can play it all day. Obviously, I think Slayton is our natural, nose. With the way Kenny plays, I think that he has made he's made Carl Brooks' life easier. I mean, he made Devontae Wyatt's life easier. Whenever the other guys are out there, they're trying to figure out how to stop Kenny, and they end up one-on-one, and they end up with some hell of a penetration, and they made plays because of that. To me, that's a quality that I think gets lost sometimes. Obviously, Dexter Lawrence is that guy too, but he moves two guys back almost as fast as he moves one. With Kenny Clark, I think we just have to give him credit for what he's doing, even for the other guys, and what he causes in terms of the problems for the offense. All right, go ahead. I'm gonna let you go ahead and do your honorable mention, and then like I said, I'll only fill in ones that you don't have.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny was definitely one of mine. I think, with the exception of maybe like 2022, where it just didn't seem like he produced at the level we had been used to him producing. He's always been considered a top 5, interior guy since he's been in the league. I think there are a lot of guys that fit that like 5 through 10 type of category with interior defensive linemen. I mean, you have Derek Brown in Carolina, a stout guy similar to Dexter Lawrence in terms of his play style, highly respected guy. In Washington, they have 2 in Deron Payne and Anderson. I don't know why I can't think of his first name right now. They have both of those Bama guys who are just consistently producing, and they hold down the interior of that defense. I think a guy who most fans probably won't know, but NFL offensive linemen certainly do is Zach Sealer from Miami. I think his increase in production the last 2 years is probably a large reason that they were a little more comfortable letting Christian go, because he's listed as a defensive end, but he's an interior guy. And dude had double-digit sacks from the interior last year, got paid accordingly. So, that's a guy who I definitely think is underrated in terms of the public eye, but he just produces. Then you have, DeForest Buckner of the Colts. Ever since he stepped in the league, he's always been a top-tier interior guy, and he's ridiculous. He's like 6'7" or 6'8", I think, which is just unheard.
6'7", 295. Yep.
Yeah, just unheard of to be an interior defensive lineman at that height, just because it's so hard to get leverage when you're that big. But he's just been a dog his whole career. The Ravens have an interior run stuffer guy in Justin Matabike. Last couple of years, he's just been a dog, and he's actually had some sack production as well. So want to give him credit for that. I think he's a guy that, again, most people might not necessarily know about, but he's just a playmaker. Those are the guys that come to mind for me in terms of honorable mention. I think a lot of those guys were fighting for that, that 4 or 5 spot, and a lot of those guys make sense given what they put on the table.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think when you look at the disruption of an offense, I think if you talk to any quarterback, they are going to tell you that. And as a matter of fact, I think that Tom Brady spoke about this on a podcast, or maybe it was in an interview on TV, when they talk about what is the thing that actually messes up what you have planned the most. And he said pressure up the middle. So all of these guys, if you really look at it from the standpoint of, well, why are we picking them, and where is the impact come in at, are they disrupting the offense with pressure coming up the middle? Or if they try to run up the middle, are these guys actually making the play or bouncing it or spilling it? Are they making things happen from the inside? And a number of the guys you mentioned are some of my honorable mention guys. The additional ones for me, look, Grady Jarrett has been doing it for a long time. He is one of those guys, he's undersized in height, but because he's so short, being that short at 305, he's built like basically he's Dexter Lawrence squished down, so he's one of those dudes who they really can't do much with him. He's been that dude ever since he got in the league. He's been doing it a long time. He has not really fallen off enough to where I can say, well, he probably only has a few years left. He pretty much is going to have I guess, however many years until he starts to, at some point, either have injuries or drop off or whatever. It just hasn't happened yet. I know he had a serious injury. It may have been like
Yeah,
4
ACL.
years ago. Yeah. But look, he came right back, and was ready to go. Next is, with Vita Vea, you're talking about that immovable, force. He's that big guy. He reminds me, and it's not just because, of his name. He reminds me of a guy I played with, Dan Saliomua. Dan may have been 5'11". I mean, I think they listed him at 6 feet. I mean, he was probably 5'11", 350. And I mean, you weren't moving him. And believe it or not, Dan at that size ran like a 4.8 40. And when you imagine the level of explosiveness coming out of that compactor guy who's so big girth wise, and you just can't move him. So, like I said, that's who Vita Vea reminds me of. The last two that I will mention in terms of the guys that I have that you have not mentioned is Arik Armstead and then Javon Hargrave. Now, obviously, when you think of Arik Armstead, you basically have another DeForest Buckner. He's just a little bit lighter, but I mean, 6'7" dude, playing on the inside. That's just, look, man, you're talking about a heck of an athlete, first of all, to even get down there and be able to come out and make, get any kind of leverage when you're dealing with guys who most of the time they're not even getting down where you are in the stands. So they're already, on top of you. But he's making plays, just like DeForest Buckner. Look, Javon Hargrave, he was a guy, I looked at his film when he was coming out of college because he's an HBCU guy. The way he looked, it was kind of, I was thinking that this dude is going to come in and be another Aaron Donald. Like, that's how he looked in college. And the thing is, obviously, I'm looking at that against, FCS level competition. And quite frankly, though, since he's been in the league and he's gotten paid now I think he's on his 4th contract, I think it is. So you're talking about a guy who has been able to do what he's done. Those contracts were renegotiations a couple of times because he just played so well. Javon Hargrave has really been an Aaron Donald-like type of guy. He's, I think, an inch taller than Aaron because Aaron Donald may have been 6 feet something. It was like 6 feet and a quarter or something like that. Javon is 6'2", so he, a little bit taller than Aaron. But in terms of his game and how he plays, he gets under him and he really wreaks havoc up the middle. And that's why I knew it was going to be a problem having him in San Francisco with that already, tenacious front that they had out there. But hey, look, we took them jokers all the way down to basically a missed field goal because, look, that tells you how important the team is. But that's it. I mean, that's what I have, man. I really believe that from a defensive perspective, the interior guys, although they're overlooked a lot, I think that's the first place where if you have an impact guy, that's really something that the offense coordinator and quarterback are going to have to be able to scheme and plan to avoid that particular thing ruining their plays. What else you got?
No, that's it. I mean, having disruptive interior defensive linemen changes everything. I mean, you're talking about protections have to be shifted. You can't leave those guys one-on-one, which means someone else is one-on-one on the outside where you really want them. You're talking about not being able to run the ball right at a Dexter Lawrence, Kenny Clark, all these type of guys. Literally everything with game planning starts from the inside out, right? So if you literally just have one interior disruptor, that sets the tone. Your linebackers are a little more free because the double team got to stay on there. They can't be worried about a linebacker when if you let him go, it plays dead as it is. No, they are a massive component of what makes a great defense great, and that's why basically all the guys we talked about are on the top tier defenses across the league. Talking about the Niners, talking about the Jets, the Ravens, all these different teams. That's where it starts is from the interior, and then everyone else gets opportunities to make plays. So that's really it.
Yeah, and you hit it on the head too. Also relative to who they free up. I mean, look, I know you as a linebacker. Hell, I as a strong safety, I loved to have those guys up front taking up all of the linemen, and they couldn't pull. They had to worry about them. Hey, look, I was free to have some absolute knockout tackles coming up in the hole, and a fullback. And I love that too. I love when the fullback had a clear shot coming, thinking he's gonna have an easy go taking me on the ISO, and it don't work like that. That ain't how it's gonna go. I remember you caught one in that Michigan game when you were at Maryland, and he realized, yeah, this thing ain't gonna be that easy. But look, you have them interior defensive linemen, they really help set that up. So we're gonna close this one out. Again, we thank y'all for joining us. Don't forget to share and also subscribe on YouTube. You can also follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And as always, go Pack Go.